You are live.
Beautiful. Good morning. Good morning. Happy Friday, ladies. Welcome, welcome. We're so excited that you're here today for our Friday class in the Elevated Mother Collective. If you've been joining us all month long, in May, we've been talking about motherhood. And today, my topic is that you are more than a mother. And my intention today is to really build on the previous classes. If you haven't gotten a chance to watch all the amazing classes taught by Robin, Cherie, and Missy in this month, I definitely recommend that you go back and take some time to listen to those. I'll be referencing some of their classes, some of the things that they've shared, but I definitely recommend that you get to go enjoy all of their awesomeness. Because today I really want to dive in a little bit based on those tools that they shared on how we get to release some of the mom guilt and the shame that we feel and really step into who you really are as a mom, as a woman, in your full identity, not just in little pieces here and there. And then I also want to let you know, all of you moms that are listening, this class is for you, no matter where you are at. If you are here because you are trying to figure out how do I even do my self-care? How do I even take care of me in the midst of motherhood? If you are trying to figure out how do I maintain a healthy marriage or relationship, if I'm trying to figure out how to balance work or entrepreneurship, or even just have a hobby outside of mothering and the daily activities of that, how do I do that? This class is for all of you, no matter where you're at, no matter if you are a stay-at-home mom or a part-time working, full-time working, working in the home, working outside of the home. This class is for all of you. And I'll add to that I really do believe that there are no cookie cutter moms. This maybe this ideal version that we're thinking of, there are no cookie cutter moms. And so today I don't have cookie cutter answers for you. You are unique and individual. And so the answers for you and for your life and for your family are going to be individual and unique. But today I'm hoping to share some principles, some guides, and some tools. I'm really big about, I want you to come away with physical, practical tools that you can implement in your life. And I know a lot of us are busy. And so a lot of these tools you can do in 5 minutes or less. Okay, if you want to do more, that's totally up to you. I sometimes get carried away when I go down a rabbit hole, especially, working on something that I really love or I'm really passionate about. But just, 5 minutes or less, and I feel like you can really make some good progress for yourself. So I'm not seeing all the comments. Let me real quick. I want to be able to make sure that I can see people who are here. I'm not seeing all the comments. There we go. Oh, yep. Cherie's saying I need to introduce myself. Sorry, I get so excited. I get so excited. So I'm Christy Garcia. I'm the newest elevation specialist on the Elevated Mother team. I have one little girl. My daughter Brooklyn is about 13 months old and just the light of my life, just the best thing ever. Um, some of you may know that my journey to mother had looked really unique. Um, some miscarriages, infertility, cancer showed up along the way. Ended up welcoming my daughter via surrogate after a long journey there. And so I had worked in professional fields for about 10, 12 years before I brought a baby home and felt like, okay, now I'm in the motherhood, right? I was a teacher. I was a preschool toddler teacher in Montessori for about 5 years. And then I went back to school, transitioned, thought, oh, maybe I'm going to do nursing. And then fell in love with public health. I worked in healthcare for about the last 5, 6 years and just loved it. Um, and so as my career has gone, different places, those have been my main two careers. But along the way, I was a wedding planner. I'm a foot zone therapist. I'm a Zumba instructor. I kind of have an obsession with learning, maybe just a little bit. And that's not a bad thing. And that's something that I've really embraced about myself. And we'll talk a little bit about embracing yourself later on in the class. But like I said in the beginning, no matter where you're coming from, whether you've worked outside the home, not, whatever that experience is for you, this class is for you. Okay. I'm hoping to give you practical tools that you can take away today and apply in your daily life. So before we jump into that, I want to talk a little bit about this teeter-totter that us moms kind of jump on a little bit, of guilt and shame. Okay. And guilt and shame are very similar, but also there are some important differences. I could teach a whole class on shame, maybe. No, definitely I could teach that class. Maybe that'll be later this year, ladies. Because I think it's really important for a lot of us to really understand how that affects us. But guilt is feeling bad, or something is wrong. Something is wrong. This situation, I don't like how it turned out. I didn't show up as my best. I don't like this situation. I feel guilty that I didn't do something, right? And shame is I am wrong. It is this deep held belief that I am not good enough. I am not enough, right? And a lot of us moms jump on this teeter totter, no matter what our working, non-working situation looks like, and say, okay, I feel guilty if I'm spending time away from my kids, or feel guilty that dinner looked like macaroni and cheese and hot dogs again, right? And then we also go down to the shame side. Maybe I'm not good enough to have my own business. Maybe I'm not good enough as a mother because fill in the blank, whatever that reason is coming up for you. We all hop on this teeter totter, right? And go back and forth. And today, ladies, I want to give you permission to just hop off the teeter totter. It doesn't have to control who you are as an individual, who you are as a mom. Okay. And a lot of the time, the weights that keep bringing that teeter totter back and forth are the judgments that we have about ourselves, about our mothering, the comparisons we have. And so I'm going to use an acronym. I'm going to use R, A-R-E. You are more than a mother. Okay. And so A is for awareness. Okay. If you ladies aren't aware of a pattern or a thought pattern that's going on, a behavioral pattern in your life, then you can't change it. Right. So we first have to become aware. Okay. And so I think it's important. I'm going to spend a few minutes and share some questions with you. Okay. You don't have to write them all down super fast. You can come back. Yes, Megan, we're hopping off the teeter totter. And these questions will help you be aware of where you are in that teeter totter. And then we'll move into how we can step off the teeter totter. Okay. So these questions, if you can write down shorthand or come back and listen to them, but we can use these questions as a journaling exercise, as just a reflection exercise for 5 minutes or less, right? So let me grab my questions. Okay. I'll go slow, but you can also come back and listen to these questions. Okay. Reflecting on your upbringing, what messages about motherhood did you receive from your own mother, grandmother, or other female family members? How do these messages influence your current expectations? Okay. Second, how do societal portrayals of motherhood in the media, television, movies, social media, shape your expectations of what it means to be a good mother? Can you identify specific examples that have impacted you? Third, do you find yourself comparing your parenting style or choices to those of friends, siblings, or peers? How do these comparisons affect your expectations and feelings around motherhood? Fourth, what cultural or societal norms around motherhood do you feel pressured to conform to? How do these norms align or conflict with your personal beliefs and values? That one is really important. How do these norms align or conflict with your personal beliefs and values? We're going to dive into that in just a few minutes. And then last one, have you ever felt that your expectations of motherhood were unrealistic or unattainable? Where do you think these high standards originated from? And how do they impact your day-to-day life as a mother? Okay. I know some of those were a mouthful. You can go back, you can listen, break them down. Just use one question at a time for a 5-minute journaling or a 5-minute reflection. Because when we're able to reflect and really see, where am I coming from? Where am I starting today? What position am I on in the teeter-totter, right? Then we can start to figure out, well, what tool do I need to get off? What support do I need to get off this teeter-totter? If now I know, wow, I'm carrying a lot of expectations. I will definitely put, yes, Robin, I will put those questions in the captions of the call when we're done. Okay. But again, you can go back and listen to those so that you can take time to reflect and really become aware of, what am I carrying around that maybe isn't even yours? Maybe it's your mom's, maybe it's your grandma's, maybe it was the religious culture that we grew up in, that says motherhood looks like this, this box, and that's what motherhood is. And to be an active, present, engaged mom, it means I have to be making meals from scratch every night, or I have to be running carpool, or I have to be at every game, or whatever that looks like for you. None of those are good or bad inherently, those ideas of what the actions of motherhood, the doing that make you a good mother or a present mother or whatever that adjective is for you, ladies. But you can also just be a good mother without any of the actions, right? If you didn't know that, let me remind you again, you can just be a good mother because you love your kids, because you're present for your kids, not because you're perfect, not because any of those things look the way, the expectations that have been attached to them. I was talking about this class with my mom. I have a wonderful mom. She's in this group. Hi, Mom. I love you. And she shared a story with me. When I was a little girl, we lived in Michigan, and we had a 60-acre farm and a garden the size of a football field. And I remember that very clearly as a little girl, weeding all summer. Not my favorite thing. But my mom grew up on a ranch on a farm. And so farm life and, all of that was very normal for my mom. My mom is a very hard worker. And at the time, she had 6 kids, had just had my little brother. And she shared with me that she was feeling really guilty, really bad. Like, why can't I do all the canning? My mom used to be able to can, and she had 6 kids, and she did the garden, and she did all the farm work, and she did all of these things. Why can't I do all of these other things that she seemed to be able to do that I'm really struggling with? And after she sat and reflected a little bit, she said, wow, well, first of all, the time span I had my children in, my mom had 6 kids in 10 years. And her mom also had 6 kids, but they were a little bit more spread out, had a little bit more time in between, about 6 kids, 15, 16 years. And she also had her grandmother that lived with them full time. She had another adult woman in the house helping to do the childcare, the canning, the gardening, all the other things that they were doing in the house. And so when my mom sat back and looked at the context of, yes, I have 6 kids and my mom had 6 kids, but the situations, the support that she had versus what I have, she was living really far away at the time from any family. Like I said, our family was all in Utah and we were living in Michigan, really far away. And when she stopped and gave herself some grace, got really aware of, like, wow, when I'm making comparisons, I'm making some judgments, so I should be able to. Ladies, as you come into our Elevated Mother space, in the collective, in the coaching program, in the Elevated Mother experience, you'll learn that should is a red flag. Okay. Should is that red flag that we are judging. Okay. And judgment never brought anything nice to anybody. Okay. It will cut you off and make you feel small, make you feel less than. So if you hear yourself shoulding, I should be able to do this, or I should do that, that's a good sign for you to stop and take a look at what's going on. Okay. So that's where we're going to really start, is we need to be aware of, where are you? Am I shaming myself? Am I guilty? Am I seeing, myself out of context? I'm comparing myself to other people and situations that are actually quite different when you look underneath the surface. Okay. But so much of our social media world, right? We just see the surface and think that that's the whole truth. That's what her house looks like all the time, all clean and picked up and nice. When maybe it looks like that for 10 seconds because she shoved everything in the closet so she could get the picture that she wanted, right? I'm guilty of that, right? Have you ever had visitors and I just shoved the rest of the dirty dishes in the stove until they were gone so I could finish because I didn't have time to finish cleaning the kitchen, right? Okay, so that's the first step and the first activity that you ladies can go spend some time with at home and say, really, where is this coming from? Where are the roots of my beliefs about how I should show up as a mother, how I should show up as a woman in my life, right? Yes, Megan, we got to stop and give ourselves some grace. Okay, and then the second piece is the R to reframe. Okay, so how do we reframe? Now that we're aware, like, okay, maybe this isn't realistic. Maybe this has really been really harmful for me. How do I reframe this? Okay. And the first one is what I just said, is that you get to go back and look at all these expectations. Say, is this belief serving me? Is the belief that I should be able to care for 3 kids under 3 and can all my own food and make home meals from scratch and do all the carpool and do all the, is that serving me? Because if it is, if it makes you feel alive and joyful and fulfilled, fantastic. More power to you, ladies. But if it's making you feel like you're guilty every day, that you're not measuring up, that any of those kinds of emotions or feelings, it's not serving you any longer. Okay. And you get to reframe it and say, well, what would serve me? What belief do I get to substitute for these ones that I've been holding on to that maybe have really been holding me back? Okay. So you get to go back and we call it sometimes thought interrupt when you're having those thoughts, but you get to go back and say intentionally, what beliefs do I want to put instead of that? I believe I'm a good mother because I love my kids and I try every day instead of because I checked off all the boxes and did all the things that I should be doing. Okay. But another way that we can reframe is to really look and see, how does God see us as mothers, as women? Okay. I deeply love the scriptures. Okay. So in thinking of this class, I went back and looked in the scriptures for examples. And the first one that came to mind was the story of the creation in Genesis. And just that was so beautiful as I was studying it. And the Lord didn't just create one kind of tree, He didn't just create one kind of animal. In fact, He is very specific about the multitude of His creations, the variety of His creations. Okay. And so, if you were listening to Missy's class last week, she talked about how we as women, females, we have unlimited creation energy, okay, in this world. And that is not limited to the bearing of children, the raising of children, though that is a really beautiful aspect of our womanhood and our femininity. But we have unlimited creation energy. And if God gives us a pattern to follow and He can create in variety and differences and in everything, all kinds of animals upon the face of the earth, then we can create in all different areas of our life, in our mothering, in our hobbies, in our relationships, in work pursuits, in creating completely new things as an entrepreneur. Then I think we can do that too. I think the Lord is giving us permission, saying, you can create as well. And another scripture that I really love in the Bible, in Proverbs. And I think sometimes we just focus on a woman, the virtuous woman is worth her price in rubies, right? But if we actually read the rest of the scripture, so I'm going to take the time to read these verses to you. It's Proverbs 31, 10 through 28. And I want you to think about this. He's not describing, oh, this is the perfect woman. This is this one woman and she does it all. I want you to think about the Lord is describing your capacity, your capabilities, and then you get to choose. Okay. You get to choose, what do I want? How do I want this to look? Okay. So it's so beautiful. And I want you to go back and look at it and say, okay, that's me. That's my skill. That's my strength. I want to choose that. Okay. So he says, who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. Maybe we're all familiar with that verse, but he keeps going. Oh, ladies, he keeps going. He knows you. He says, the heart of her husband doth safely trust in her, so that shall have no need of spoil. She will do him good and not evil all the days of her life. She seeketh wool and flax, and worketh willingly with her hands. She is like the merchant ship. She bringeth her food from afar. She rises also while it is yet night, and giveth meat to her household, and a portion to her maidens. She considereth a field, and buyeth it. With the fruit of her hands she planted a vineyard. Lady, she bought her own field. She's planting her own vineyard. Okay. She perceiveth that her merchandise is good. Her candith goeth out not by night. She layeth her hands on the spindle, and her hands hold the distaff. She stretcheth out her hands to the poor, yea, she reacheth forth her hands to the needy. She is not afraid of the snow for her household, for all her household are clothed with scarlet. She maketh herself coverings of tapestry. Her clothing is silk and purple. Her husband is known in the gates, when he sitteth among the elders of the land. She maketh fine linen, and selleth it, and delivereth girdles unto the merchant. Strength and honor are her clothing, and she shall rejoice in time to come. She openeth her mouth in wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness. She looketh well to the ways of her household, and eateth not the bread of idleness. Her children arise and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praiseth her. Okay. So I emphasized a couple words in there. She is creation right there. She was creating her own things, she was selling her own things, she was making things, she was connecting with people. And the Lord says that is all a possibility, that you all have that capability, that He believes that in us. And I don't know about you ladies, I searched the scriptures. Was there one place that said the Lord said that a good mother is at home making all the meals from scratch every night and running carpool? I didn't find that. If you did, let me know in the comments. The Lord didn't say these are the parameters for what a good mother is. Okay. That's us putting those limitations on it. Okay? And then one more scripture. Again, I told you I really love the scriptures. Okay. And it was in Ruth. I was reading the story of Ruth and Naomi last night. And when she finally goes back, Ruth goes back with Naomi. And then she is talking with Boaz, and Boaz tells her, the Lord recompense thy work, and a full reward be given thee of the Lord thy God of Israel, under whose wings thou art come to trust. Okay. The Lord recompense thy work. And if you look back at the story, she was actually not working in the fields at the moment. He's not saying, oh, good job about working in the fields. You're a great worker. He's saying, all of your work, the Lord sees your work. And ladies, the Lord sees your work. He sees us in the trenches of mothering, whether that's the actions of diapering and making food and doing all of those things, but He's also with you in the being. I learned a really profound lessons as, working full time and, having a new baby this last year. Because at first I felt like, okay, I want to be home with her. And that was what I always envisioned, that I'm going to stay home. And, that is going to just be like bliss, ladies. And it is. I love being with my daughter. Even in the cranky moments and the poopy diapers and all the things. But I also really love working. I have some great strengths and skills that I have chosen and developed over the years in a professional capacity that I'm really good at, that I'm really good at mentoring other people, that I'm really good at training other people, that I learn new things really quickly. And I love that part of me, ladies. I do. And when I was able to reframe, and instead of, I passed my daughter off to my mom in the morning, she got to watch her while I was working outside of the home. And I caught myself saying, oh, I'm sorry, baby, when she's fussing, that I'm leaving. I'm sorry, babe, I gotta go to work. I said, wait, am I sorry? No, I'm choosing to go to work and to provide, in this way for my family. I'll definitely put those scripture references in the chat for you, Latia. Um, and so I said, okay, instead of saying, because this is an experience that I'm choosing, working for my family, then I get to say, I get to go to work. I get to do this. And Brooklyn, that's my little girl. Brooklyn, you get to play with Grammy today. You get to play with friends today. You get to explore the garden with Grammy today. I choose, right? Whatever your family situation looks like, working at home, we are choosing into that situation for our families. And some of you ladies say, oh, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I'm choosing that we both have to work. I would really love to be with my family. We still have choices every single day in the situations, in the circumstances of our lives. It is a choice, and we get everything we choose. Yes, Robin, absolutely. And I was reading recently a lovely book, 10x is easier than 2x. And I mean, he's talking about entrepreneurs, but this part about identity really struck me. I really thought about it a lot. And he says, your identity is fundamentally two things: the story or narrative you have for yourself, and the standards or commitments you hold for yourself. Okay. So this identity that you have around mothering, about your professional, your job, or your career, or your entrepreneurship is fundamentally two things. The story, oh yes, leadership books are great for parenting. um, but this identity is about the stories that we're telling ourselves. Okay, what is the story that I'm creating? Okay, I go to work because I want to provide this for my family, and I get to develop myself individually. And what is the story that you're creating? Or are we creating this other story of like, oh, I have to go to work. We can't survive on one income alone. I know she hates daycare, but that's, you know what I mean? What story are you creating about what's going on in your life? Okay. And then the second part of that identity that we're creating is the values that you're committed to. Okay. Are you committed to present quality time with your daughter? Are you committed to personal development? Are you committed to spontaneity and fun? Or are you committed to organization and structure? And I'm not saying that you can't be committed to all of those things in different moments, but as we find those values that we're committed meaning that we're willing to act on them and we're willing to create underneath them, that forms part of our identity that we are choosing to create. Okay. So the stories that you're telling about yourself and the values that you're committed to. Okay. So this next tool that you get to go home and do is, whether it's a journaling or a reflection experience, is what story am I telling about this? What story am I telling about my motherhood? What story am I telling about my work, my professional life, whether that how it affects my finances? What story are you telling? Okay. And is it the story that you want to keep telling? Is it a story you want to keep reading? Okay. And if it's not a story that you want to keep reading, you get to go rewrite it. Okay. And then the second part of that, again, 5 minutes when you have a moment. A lot of times, I was doing it on my drive to work. The second part is, what values am I committed to? When it really boils down to it, when I'm looking at my mothering, my my professional life, my hobbies, my interests, what am I really committed to? What are my top values? Okay. What are my top values? And is my story that I'm telling aligned with these values? Okay. If I'm saying I really value personal development, but I'm telling myself a story about how I'm not fulfilled in my career, or I'm not valued at work, or I'm not, whatever the story is for you ladies, okay, then we can get to Matt, say, okay, I'm going to rewrite my story because my values are this, and that's who I really think I am right here. That's who I choose I am. Okay. We get to choose. That's really important, ladies. That is a big concept that we talk about in this elevated mother space, and in the elevated mother program. I get a little excited and talk a little fast. Sorry, ladies. Um, that's a big concept we talk about. So often in not just motherhood, but in life, we start to give away our agency. Say, well, it's based on what does my husband want? Okay. And my kids have all of these scheduling needs that I am just at the mercy of, right? And we start placing giving away our agency out here. Well, it's dependent on that schedule and this schedule and this other thing. And we get to bring it back to ourselves and say, actually, I get to choose the experience that I want to create here, right? We get to choose what we're going to create and who we get to be. Okay. So that again, those experiences are those tools you get to use. You get to go back and reflect or write on what is the story that I'm telling about this in my life, and what are the values that I'm most committed to. And if they don't match up, how would I like to rewrite my story and choose the values that I'm committed to? Okay. And that leads us into the third part. And I'm excited. We have lots of time to talk about this. Okay. This part is about embracing. The E is to embrace. So awareness, reframe, and then embrace. Okay. And we've already talked about this power that we have to choose that is so crucial. But another part of this, as we work to embrace, whether it's your dreams, your time for yourself, your self-care, your time to dedicate to a relationship, to work time, entrepreneurship, all hobby, all the things is really your responsibility to create. You get to take responsibility for your dreams and aspirations and motherhood. You get to have that responsibility. I think sometimes we get caught up and say, well, I'm a partner. Like I'm in a partnership with my spouse or, with my significant other. And shouldn't they also be responsible for what this looks like? Okay. And we get to come back to ourselves and say, ultimately, I'm responsible for who I want to be, how I want to show up in the world, in motherhood, in my profession, in my job. I get to take back responsibility and say, it's actually no one else's responsibility around me. It's not my bosses. It's not my spouses. It's not my coworkers. It's not my neighbors for how I get to show up in this space. And that is, instead of feeling like heavy about that, ladies, it can actually feel really, really empowering. If I'm 100% responsible for my life and what I'm going to create, who I want to be, then that's incredible. The sky is the limit, right? Yes, Megan, I love that. She said that she's been miserable giving her agency away. Okay. And when we give it away and say, oh, someone else needs to be responsible for making me progress or grow or be the kind of mother I need to be if I just had enough support. Nope, it doesn't work that way. We don't get to control anyone else in our lives. Okay. Least of all our spouses, right? They have their own choices and their own agency, but you have 100% responsibility. And that empowers me. Okay. And then, so this made me think about when was the last time that I felt like, okay, I can really clearly define my identity as an individual. And maybe not the last time, but a time that came up really clearly was when I was in high school, preparing to go to college. And you're right, you're writing all of these college admission essays and, almost like a resume in all your applications. Well, what were all your activities and what were all your roles? And let me say, ladies, I prepared for college like I was applying for NASA. Okay. I think I did every single possible extracurricular activity that I could possibly fit at any given time in a 24-hour period. I could give, my high school resume looked better than my professional resume for years because I could say, oh, I was involved in, my identity was around, I was in orchestra and I was in drama and I was the president of the speech club and the academic club and all the things, right? And that was super clear, as a teenager, we're forming our first identities about ourselves. But now I can reflect back later and say They were really external identifiers. Okay. Any of you ladies, pop it in the chat. If you have found yourself in life starting to identify yourself by accomplishments, by groups that you're a part of, by external things that apply an identifier to you. Anyone else? Maybe just me? Overachiever, people pleaser, anything like that. Okay. And that was totally me in high school and all the way into college. It was that the more I could do made me more valuable as an individual. The more I could accomplish made me more valuable as a woman, right? I was trying to justify my awesomeness. Ladies, you don't have to justify your awesomeness. You just are. Okay. You are just that amazing. Okay. Sometimes we think the doing, remember I talked about this in the beginning. Sometimes we think the doing creates the value. And it's really the being, who you are. Okay. And who God says you are. Okay. And that doesn't change. That's something we also get to dive into a lot in this program is about worth, our idea about worthiness and where that comes from. Hi, Jackie. Jackie said she didn't know the call was about her today. So often in our life, we've created these resumes about, this is who I am because I've done this, I've accomplished this. And that's very common in the professional world, right? They want you to prove your value. Well, you've managed this project and you've brought in this amount of income and you've done all these things. They want you to be able to have a list, say, this is why I'm valuable, or this is why I'm a valuable employee, why I deserve a promotion, all of these things. So that's very something in corporate culture that is very normal and very accepted, right? And in certain situations, that may not be a bad principle to say, hey, you got to put in the work. You don't just show up and say, hey, I'm a great person, hire me. You say, well, you can check my references and here's some examples of my work. Okay. But when we start doing that in motherhood, trying to constantly prove that we're good enough, or that the way we are parenting, the way we are mothering, the way we are balancing, we also talk a lot about balance. The balance might be actually really is a myth in motherhood, in life, that we don't really, it's not really about balance. It's about choices and it's about priorities. Okay. And you get to choose how it's going to look. And it doesn't have to look like anyone else that's on this call. If you know for yourself, this is who I am as a mother, and this is what is aligned for me and my family, and at this stage in my life. Okay. I know Jackie in the comments, she's part of the Elevated Mother program, joking about this call being about her, but I was really thinking about her when I was on this call or preparing for this call. Jackie has an incredible business, very business minded. Right now she's training for triathlons. And I thought about, how does Jackie do it all, right? And in a conversation Jackie and I had, she talked about, I just decided it's going to look different. It's going to look like the snacks are really accessible for my kids, that I'm not, spending all this time, that I allow myself to do things the way that works for me and not what might work for someone else. And I love that. Back to the idea about balance. Megan says she likes the word harmony instead of balance, which is great. Robin has shared in the past the idea of balancing a ballerina on her pointe shoes. And from afar, from the audience, that ballerina looks like she is so still and perfect and balanced on her toes. And I've been a ballerina. I did ballet for about 12, 13 years. And it is a myth, ladies. It is definitely the appearance of stillness and ease when you're really using a lot of strength and you're rapidly moving your toes back and forth to keep yourself balanced like that. Balance. Your toes are actually moving. They're flexed. They're all your muscles in your feet are engaged in that moment. And you might have times, ladies, in your motherhood, in your life, that you feel like I'm using all of my muscles. I am very engaged right now in the mothering. I'm very engaged right now trying to do the things that I want to be the woman, the mother, the wife, the career person that I want to be, that I choose to be. Okay. Even when we recognize that this is a choice and this is what I want, that doesn't take away that there are hard parts, that it might feel hard. That's okay, ladies. That's okay. But you can also say, well, what if it was easy? Because I choose this, because I love this, I accept that some of this is not going to look the way I thought it was going to look. Sometimes it's going to require all of my physical and mental and emotional muscles, right? Go back to Cherie's class. She taught us some really good skills about managing all of our emotional muscles, right? Okay. Sometimes you're going to be really engaged, and it's not just in the feet as a ballerina, it's all the way up into your legs, it's in your core, you're completely engaged. Okay. But I can tell you, ladies, as a previous ballerina, that I would come off the stage, I would come out of performances feeling so alive in my body, feeling so proud of the beauty I just created because I engaged every part of me. Okay? Ladies, the Lord allows us to engage every part of ourselves. Okay? He wants the engagement. He wants the engagement in our motherhood. He wants the engagement in these spiritual gifts. We just had a conversation earlier this week about, whether we're given spiritual gifts or whether we choose them. Okay. I definitely believe that he opened up the door and said, hey, here's some that I have. If you're willing, if you're willing to accept them and willing to develop them. And then there are some that said, you know what? I would really like that one. I think that one would really serve me in this stage and as a mother and as a wife. I'm going to choose that one. Okay. So he opens the door and says, hey, here are all these gifts. Here you go. Okay. Because he wants us to be fully engaged in our lives, ladies, in all of our talents, in all of our areas, in all of the ways that we can create in this life. Okay. The Lord loves your effort. He sees your effort, ladies. Okay. It makes me think of the parable of the talents. Again, I love the scriptures. We talk about this parable quite often in this program. That the Lord gives us opportunities to grow, to invest, to develop. Okay. But it's up to us what we choose to do. We're saying, well, I think motherhood for me is just, it's going to look like this. And that's all I want. I don't really want to look outside. I don't need to have time for myself. I don't need to dedicate time to my marriage or, this is an extreme example, ladies. Okay. But that would be, the man that buried his talent. Okay. That says, I'm just putting my blinders on and I don't want to mess this up. I don't want to mess up this motherhood thing. I don't want to mess up this career thing or my marriage thing. So I'm just going to stay right here because it's not messing me up. Right. But that's not the intention that the Lord has for us. Beautiful. Thank you, Robin. Robin reminds us the Lord doesn't love us less or more ever because of our choices. Very clear distinction there. Okay. But the Lord does give us an opportunity. Said, if you choose it, you can multiply, you can create, you can expand in your life. Okay. And we get to do that. We get to choose to do that. We get to say, hey, it's my responsibility. How do I want this to look? I want to engage fully. I want to be every part of myself. Okay. The Lord loves you in every single way, no matter what your choices, no matter what your family dynamic looks like or your employment situation or any of those things. He loves you no matter what. Okay. And now we get to now move into I love me no matter what. If I know that the Lord loves me no matter what, maybe I can do that too. Okay. So some tools for you ladies to take away today to start on that journey of loving yourself, choosing yourself, no matter what this looks like for you. Two things. First one is what we call a delights list. Just set a timer for 5 minutes and write as many things that you can think of that really, truly delight you, that bring you joy as an individual. Okay. And I want you to be careful here that you're not putting things on your delight list that you should put, right? Well, I should love pedicures. That seems like a great self-care thing. If you don't love people touching your feet, maybe that's not for your list. Okay. If you don't love running for exercise, don't put it on your list, ladies. Okay. I love dancing and I put dancing on my list. Okay. So you get to choose what are the things that delight me? What are the things that bring me joy? Okay. And sometimes those are going to be, it's okay if that's Play-Doh with my kids. And it's okay if it's running the corporate board meeting at work. Okay. If that's really something that brings you joy, that's fantastic. I love that Robin said that she loved, on day when she hosted a retreat and teaches hundreds of women, right? That's a delight for her. Okay. So this first tool that you can do, 5 minutes or less, ladies, make yourself a delights list and then put it up. Okay, am I putting in these delights in my life? Am I choosing into this? Is this part of the new story that I get to rewrite about my life? Okay. And are these aligned with values that I'm committed to? One of those values is I'm committed to loving myself the way God loves me, perfectly, in every aspect, in every way, no matter what. How do I show up and love myself? And the delights list can be a great tool for choosing to love yourself, choosing to show up for yourself. The second tool you ladies can use is that you can vision out, okay? What do I want my life to look like? What do I want? You can break it down to what do I want my mothering to look like? What do I want my career to look like? My relationship, okay? And really sit in the feeling of what you're choosing, okay? I love Megan to put in the chat, we can choose to expand. How do I want that to look? Okay. If there were no limitations, ladies, when I'm asking you to do this vision exercise, either a journaling, write it out, or just sitting in your mind, I want you to remove all the limitations. If there was no time limitations, if there were no money limitations, if there were no whatever expectations and judgments that we've put on us, if those are all gone and dissolved, what is the vision that I would love to step into, that I would love to create for me, for my family? Okay. So those are two tools that you can do. Take home 5 minutes or less. Okay. And as you move through the awareness of where you are rooted, these beliefs, these judgments, these expectations, these comparisons that might be weighing down your teeter-totter, that keep you stuck going back and forth between shame and guilt. Okay. Then you can say, okay, I'm getting off. If I unload all of these things that are on my teeter-totter that are keeping me stuck here, okay, now what do I want it to look like? What is the story that I'm choosing for myself? Okay. And what values am I committed to? And when I decide that, when I choose that, when I get to reframe, this is how God thinks of me and my capacity and my ability and my worth, which is fixed and eternal and not changing, okay? Then I get to choose to embrace and love myself the way God does. Okay? Taking full responsibility for what that looks like and getting to choose what I want to create, not just as a mother, but as a woman. With your unlimited creative energy, you get to choose and you get to engage fully, okay, in all parts of yourself. Okay. I loved, hearing some of your thoughts. I'll go back in the comments and share, all of those references and quotes and questions. I really do want you ladies to walk away with tools that you can do. We've got a lot of busy moms on this call. So glad that you're here today, or listening to this later, because these tools have blessed my life and so many women in this group over and over and over again. Okay. As we've taken the time to fully embrace ourselves and to learn to love ourselves the way God loves us in all of our aspects, in all of our skills and abilities and facets and roles that we play in this life. Okay. We're really excited. Next week we have, for the last week of May, we have a Q&A session. So look for that. We're going to have a post put up for you to put your questions, referring back to all the things we've talked about in May about motherhood. And we'll probably have a specific link for this. So just watch for that in the group. It will have a special link so you can jump on and ask your questions in real time and get, feedback from all of us. Coaches will be on the call. I'm super excited for that Q&A. We do that every once in a while to give you an opportunity to ask questions to us. It has been such a joy to share this information with you ladies, and to really, if nothing else, if you're leaving this call and I'm just acting as the conduit from the Lord to you today, to say that the Lord loves you no matter what. He loves you no matter what your work situation looks like, no matter what your mothering situation looks like, no matter how all the pieces do or don't fit together right now in your life. He loves you extravagantly, like Missy taught us last week, that you are loved extravagantly. Okay, and you are more than a mother in the best sense of the word. Not because we're diminishing motherhood, but we're saying that's a huge part of you. And you get to choose to engage fully and embrace and express yourself in all aspects of your life with all of your loves and passions and hobbies and interests and gifts and all of it. That the Lord embraces all of you, and you can too. All right. Love you, ladies, and we will see you next week.